This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
You ever been in one of those situations where you're talking to somebody and they're saying the most outrageous things and you're smirking and you're laughing, and then they keep talking about it and then they dig deeper and then they double down and you go, wait a second, I think this person's serious. That's exactly what Canadians are experiencing right now. Millions of Canadians across this great country as the incoming President of the United States, President-elect Donald Trump, has doubled down on his narrative of Canada as the 51st state and its leader at this point, Governor Justin Trudeau. Despite whatever may happen the next time Canadians head to the polls in a federal election, the President of the United States believes that Canada should become yet another state, the 51st. Says the Americans spend billions of dollars protecting Canada. Is that really what they're doing? Says that the relationship is a one-way street, that he's sick of the United States being taken advantage of, that it makes sense for Canada to just come on board. In this episode of Real Talk, we're going to ask, should Canada join the United States? Now, John, I see that as we release this title for our live streaming audience, Real Talkers join us live weekdays at 8:30 Mountain, 10:30 Eastern on 7 different social media platforms presented by California Closet. Some of our Real Talkers are already chiming in this morning. Wise Kyle says there's a real easy answer to the question Ryan's asking, should Canada join the U.S.? And he says, LOL, no. That's a laugh out loud from Kyle and an immediate no. And Kyle has made his political convictions clear in our live chat. He's a familiar name. He's one of our regulars. I think Kyle wouldn't push back if we suggested he's a conservative. And there do seem to be some interesting developments. I'm going to get into some of the replies to a tweet I sent out yesterday that took off a little bit. People that identify as Pierre Poilievre supporters, many of them seem to be keen on the idea. A lot of people that are hailing from our home province of Alberta seem to think it's a great idea that we join the United States. Maybe it's a lot of people feeling that Canada should remain Canada that simply aren't saying anything at all on social media because the idea comes across as so entirely stupid, they're not paying attention to it. But this brings me back to my opening remark. Is Donald Trump actually serious? Or is this just a distraction? Is this the baited hook that these Canadian fish like us should just swim right on past? Is it a negotiating tactic? Does this have to do with Canada meeting its defense spending commitments, its commitment to NATO, which is something that we've touched on in this show and something that I think Canada needs to do? If that's the case, if this is just a master negotiator, then so be it. But if this is the most powerful man in the world, the President of the United States, or soon to be, on January 20th, denigrating Canada, disrespecting a relationship more than a century old, if this is a threat to Canada's sovereignty, then what is the appropriate response? We'll go there in this episode. We'll get to your comments. We're going to talk to an international trade lawyer, Martha Harrison, who's got a ton of experience in this, advising clients and other stakeholders on both sides of the border on this long-standing and incredibly important trade relationship, that between Canada and the United States. We're grateful to have you here with us. We'll be taking a look at our live chat powered by Park Power, and you can always send us an email to the show to talk@ryanjesperson.com. This show doesn't happen without the support of Alberta's top online real estate school. If 2025 for you is going to be full of new opportunities, if 2025 for you could mark the beginning of an entirely new career and you're thinking real estate, you're going to start where better real estate training starts, and that's at Relo.ca. Learning online for the bold and ambitious, and wherever you are in your career, Relo's going to help you find the next level. It's the only real estate school that sets you up with a professional practice network, professional development webinars, and there's a whole lot more through their Recosystem community. So say hello to building your own business. Explore pre-licensing courses today online. And when you're there, signing up for either the Alberta commercial or the Alberta residential real estate bundles, make sure you're using that promo code Ryan100. It'll save you $100 on both of those. Keep a couple $100 in your pocket with the promo code Ryan100 when you get started today at Relo.ca. White in our live chat, and our live tuning audience is going to have a big say, I think, in the tone of today's show. We do want to know what you have to say on this, but White says, why even entertain this question? It's such sad, pathetic clickbait. And I understand why some people feel that way. Lightning Rod in the chat wondering, anybody want to sell your country? It does feel like a bit of a sellout kind of a move here. Even talking about it, Canada becoming a 51st state just doesn't seem to make sense. But John, I did go ahead and pull off an anecdotal poll of sorts with some of my friends yesterday by way of group chats and group texts, and including some friends that live in the United States or that are vacationing in the United States right now. And I asked them, what do you make of all this? What do you think of all this? And I did hear some responses back. Some said, well, you know, I wouldn't mind being able to tap into this, or I think that could be a benefit to Canada. Some people making kind of points on individual fronts, what it might do for their business or what it might do for the income tax they pay, what the financial implications might be or the educational implications might be for their family. There's a lot of talk to be had about healthcare, but a lot of people, again, like we said with White Trim, don't even want to entertain the idea. Here's why we are. Number one, because we're a talk show and this is what we do. I think that this is a good exercise in debating these types of things. But number two, because the president-elect does sound entirely serious. This isn't just some guy. This isn't Rush Limbaugh spouting off. This isn't Joe Rogan on his podcast. This isn't Marjorie Taylor Greene, or this isn't any of the other notable American personalities, Ann Coulter maybe, that may grab somebody's attention with a bombastic statement like Canada should become the 51st state. This is the guy that's about to return to the Oval Office, that will be directing policy with the most powerful economy in the world, the most powerful military in the world, and the most important trading partner and closest geographical neighbor to Canada. To set the tone, to set the table for the discussion, here's a snippet, here's a portion of what the President of the United States had to say fewer than 24 hours ago.
Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like. Why are we supporting a country, $200 billion plus a year? Our military is at their disposal. All of these other things, they should be a state. That's why I told Trudeau when he came down. And I said, that's okay to have if you're a state. But if you're another country, we don't want to have it.
So this is Donald Trump talking about this artificially drawn line, which is an international border. This is the border between the Canada and the United States. This is a big deal, not an artificially drawn line, but anybody that argues in a court of law, or anybody that's really good at convincing their friends to come over to their side in any sort of a debate knows this tactic, right? Start to cast doubt on the entire foundations of what we're talking about. If we start to see the Canada-U.S. border as nothing more than an artificially drawn line, then really what is the big deal? What are passports? What are national anthems? What are the histories of nations? Or maybe some of the characteristics or the priorities or the proud points of a country that have held true over the course of many, many decades. In Canada, you might argue universal access to health care being one of them. Trump believes that the United States is spending too much money protecting Canada. And I don't think anybody that knows what's up would argue against the assertion that Canada has not met its military spending commitments. And that's something in recent episodes of this show that we've talked about, that we do believe that Canada should be on the hook and should make good on its commitments to spend 2% of GDP on defense spending. That's a commitment that Canada has made to fellow NATO member nations. And that's something that's been a priority of Donald Trump's, to see that spending happen since he was in office the first time. I don't know how you argue against that. Canada should live up to that commitment. But make no mistake, the United States is not protecting Canada out of the goodness of its heart. The United States has Canada there as a strategic defense partner. And of course, the United States, when it sees vulnerabilities to its own security, would obviously act on that, including in partnership with Canada, as it has done over many, many decades. I mean, I'm not even going to get into our conversation on Remembrance Day with 99-year-old D-Day veteran Marty Jones. I'm not going to have to remind you, I don't think, of the long and proud history that Canadian servicemen and women have had with Americans, what we accomplished in World War II, how Canadians have been there to answer the bell. During 9/11, when all flights in the United States were grounded and Canadian airports opened up as they could, Canadians opening up their doors, opening up their hearts for American neighbors, it is and has been for a long time a very special relationship. But we're not being treated like that. And the disrespect from Donald Trump and his comments is staggering in my mind. It might be funny once to make a joke about Canada becoming a 51st state. That's the type of thing that Trump would do. Calling the Prime Minister of Canada, regardless of who it is. I know many of you that are listening to this will have strong feelings about Justin Trudeau. You're going to have your own thoughts about Justin Trudeau. And quite frankly, your feelings about Trudeau are going to pollute or at least influence your feelings on this bigger conversation about Canada's relationship with the U.S. I encourage you to try to remove yourself from that. If it was Prime Minister Stephen Harper or Prime Minister Pierre Poilievre, and the President of the United States was publicly referring to him as a governor, not respecting the office of the Prime Minister, not respecting Canada's sovereignty, how could you let that pass? For our YouTube audience, or those of you that are watching us on Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever you are, Johnny's showing us this was a Truth Social post that the president put out as well on his Instagram. He's got 30 million followers there. A map of Canada and the United States with the stars and stripes across it all, as he writes, "Oh, Canada." And you know exactly what Donald Trump was doing right there, right? He's trolling. But again, let me remind you, this is the president of the United States. This isn't a talk show host. This isn't a comedian. This isn't somebody trying to get your attention. Not even Elon Musk. This is the president-elect of the United States. So what's the appropriate response for Canadians? Well, pretty interesting to see the Prime Minister tweet about this yesterday. Sure, Justin Trudeau has resigned as the leader of the Liberal Party, triggering a leadership race. You know that. But he's still the Prime Minister of Canada. And Justin Trudeau tweeting yesterday is something that I think caught a lot of people's attention because you don't often see heads of state. You don't often see a Prime Minister, a president, a chancellor talking like this, tweeting like this. But so says Justin Trudeau. This is pretty remarkable, Johnny, wasn't it? He says there isn't a snowball's chance in hell that Canada would become part of the United States. Says workers and communities in both our countries benefit from being each other's biggest trading and security partner. We'll be asking Martha Harrison about that more in just a quick second. How about Elon Musk's response to that, though? Did you see this? This is the wealthiest man in the world and arguably probably the real president of the United States. Replies Elon Musk to the Prime Minister of Canada, quote, "Girl, you're not the governor of Canada anymore. So doesn't matter what you say."
Yeah.
That from Elon Musk. Now, folks were saying, well, okay, good for Trudeau. He says this, a lot of you, and I'll read your comments a little bit later in this episode because, boy, did we get comments when I tweeted about this. You were saying, well, Trudeau's not Trudeau is nothing. Trudeau's resigned. Trudeau finally grows a spine after going to Mar-a-Lago to get a selfie with the president. Oh, Trudeau. What is Trudeau? Trudeau's on his way out. Who cares? Others were wondering, well, where is Pierre Poilievre on all of this? If we assume, and we could get burned on this, but probably not, if we assume that he's the next Prime Minister of Canada, this will be his mess to inherit. How will he manage this? Well, we did see a tweet from Pierre Poilievre a few hours later, and here's what the now leader of the official opposition, but the favorite to be the next Prime Minister of Canada had to say about it. Pierre Poilievre says, "Canada will never be the 51st state, period." I like to see that, John. I don't know about you. I liked his opener there. He says
I like both of them,
Yeah, he says we're a great and independent country. He goes on to say we are the best friend to the United States. We spent billions of dollars, hundreds of lives, helping Americans retaliate against Al-Qaeda's 9/11 attacks as we supply the U.S. with billions of dollars of high-quality and totally reliable energy, well below market prices. You'll hear that from premiers as well, including Alberta's. He says we buy hundreds of billions of dollars of American goods. He goes on to take some political shots at the NDP and the Liberals, as you would expect he would, but he says, "I will fight for Canada." Says Pierre Poilievre, "When I am Prime Minister, we will rebuild our military and take back control of the border to secure both Canada and the U.S. We'll take back control of our Arctic to keep Russia and China out. That'll get the Americans' attention. He says we'll axe taxes. This is now turning into a campaign speech, a stump speech, you might call it. He says we'll slash red tape and rapidly green light massive resource projects to bring home paychecks and production to our country. In other words, we will put Canada first.
That tweet coming out after Justin Trudeau's
For sure.
bomb drop. But look, I'm a Canadian citizen who was born in the U.S. I'm a dually. I think both countries are amazing, but they're sovereign nations and they're different. We have different cultures, even though we're very similar. And this whole thing is a joke. I'm not even going to wade into it because we know it's not going to happen. What is dangerous is just the tone of it, where it's now gone from a joke to, wow, he's actually thinking about how he could do this. Donald Trump is actually thinking about how he and potentially Elon Musk, we know he's in his ear, could push Canada to do this. And we know it's not going to happen. But what it is going to create, and already has created, is just turmoil, chaos, division. You see it on social media and everywhere. But aside from that, the tweets, Justin Trudeau, we talked about this yesterday, that, you know, had he run again, there was talk of a slogan for not the campaign, but how he was going to operate. And that was Justin Trudeau Unleashed. So I like him unleashed. I like him clapping back just a few minutes later after seeing this press conference. I like him saying things like a no snowball's chance in hell. And I also give props to Pierre, even though he came after, because he was like, well, if Justin's saying something, I have to. Saying no.
I don't know if Poilievre feels that if Justin's saying something, he
he
has
would
to
have
say something,
anyways.
But I think that the expectation is that Canadians are assuming that you're going to say something, and right now
100%,
Canadians are looking to you as the favorite to next occupy, as the next Prime Minister of Canada, to head up what's expected to be. And there's a lot of assumptions here, friends. We acknowledge that we're a ways away from a federal election, not too long, but a ways away. But polling suggests this is a massive majority government that Pierre Poilievre's looking at, and there is no more important relationship to Canada than the United States. 100%. And so people want to know, how will Pierre Poilievre navigate this? What's his plan?
But I
see that. Give me one sec here. I see that Wayne is watching us on Facebook. He says absolutely not when he's asked if Canada should join the U.S. And I'm going to get to some comments that we're seeing from LinkedIn as well. We appreciate those of you that are watching us on LinkedIn right now.
But I just wanted to say it's nice to see leaders on both sides. JT, you've got PP, I'm going to do all the initials, and you've got Danielle Smith as well, saying this went from a joke to too far now. So it's good to see everyone on the same side.
She made that comment on our show on the 19th of December, and we're going to get to that in just a quick second. Why don't we go hot right now to Martha Harrison? I appreciate her making herself available. Martha is an accomplished international trade lawyer and a partner at McCarthy Tetreault LLP, specializes in trade, investment, regulatory matters. She's an expert on the Canada-U.S. trade relationship and has advised stakeholders on both sides of that border. She's recognized for her expertise in global supply chain management and trade compliance, and she advises clients on navigating complex cross-border challenges and policy shifts. You could call this that, Martha, couldn't you? A policy shift, or at least a harbinger of one to come.
It is, if we're going to call it a policy shift, I would hate to see what regulatory change actually looks like.
Yeah, no kidding. How are you? I mean, you have years of experience in this field. Obviously, you've seen it all or close to it all. So how are you wrapping your mind around what you're hearing from Donald Trump right now?
It really seems to me that, as you had mentioned earlier, it's unlikely that President-elect Trump actually thinks that we're going to become the 51st state. This is more of his positioning around economic issues that he's really quite concerned with. And primarily that would include the trade deficit that exists between Canada and the US. That has been a bee in his bonnet for years. And he is really doubling down on opportunities that he sees to leverage the power of the US economy in North America. And so we're hearing a lot of political rhetoric from him, the Greenland piece, the Canada being the 51st state piece. and similar issues. But I do think it's important for Canadian politicians to give a good pushback. And I'm glad that we've seen that from multiple different political parties in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, the Greenland piece, I'm glad that you mentioned it. It's not just Canada that appears to kind of be in Trump's sights right now. It indicates that there's a bigger thing at play, that sort of all bets are off. There's, convention or the history of diplomacy, of different important relationships between the United States and its partners around the world are all in flux, that no one should be too comfortable based on the way that things have always been, or based on the way that things were over the past 4 years anyway.
I think that that's a trend that we're seeing internationally, not just in North America. We certainly have seen a resurgence of a more nationalist foreign policy, meaning that, and it sort of boggles the mind having the expression nationalist foreign policy, because they're complete opposites. But we're really seeing a return to what we call friendshoring, which is where we are trying to relocate manufacturing within our domestic borders. Our economies are really coming robustly from within, as opposed to relying on our trading partners to bring in goods and services that they can offer. And friendshoring is really looking to relocate those sources of goods and supply to either friends to the north and south of us, closer to us, or well within. The Greenland piece is interesting. I do think it's again political rhetoric. I don't really expect that President-elect believes that there's any meaningful chance that Greenland would become somehow owned by or controlled by the U.S. I know that there have been some discussions in Europe about this issue, and certainly it looks as though it's another instance of him positioning the sense that the economy in the U.S. is so strong that one could be very bullish about foreign policies, even if candidly they don't necessarily make a lot of sense.
Martha, Laura's watching us right now live on LinkedIn and in our live chat powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider. She says, well, if Donald Trump doesn't value what Canada brings to the table, then maybe we should just remove it from the table. There's a lot of saber rattling that's happening right now. Trump yesterday saying that he doesn't think that Americans should import Canadian lumber or Canadian automobiles, which is a huge deal if you start to, and you can take us into that, if you start to look at Canada's exports and what the Americans bring in and the billions and billions of dollars that are at stake. Sure, the knee-jerk reaction as a Canadian is to say, well, maybe it's time we turn off the taps. Maybe we don't send you crude oil. Maybe you don't have the water security you think you have. Maybe we're not sending our power to California. Thoughts with California right now with those wildfires. But again, that's kind of nailing your own feet to the floor, isn't it? It's counterproductive.
One of the best outcomes of what is now called the CUSMA, which started as the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement and then eventually became the NAFTA, which included Mexico. One of the best outcomes is the interreliance and the sort of the reliance in the supply chain, the supply chain strategies as between Canada, U.S., and Mexico. And if we're looking at this from an economic and a trade perspective, the fact is it would be very counterproductive for Canada to actually try to cut off the U.S. from its trading partnership or try to dramatically reduce it. There's nothing wrong, and in fact, it has been advanced as a positive strategy for Canadian businesses. There's nothing wrong with diversification of supply chains. In other words, Canadian entities, Canadian sectors, manufacturing companies, exporters, and importers looking for alternative sources of partnerships outside of North America. In fact, most would say that's a prudent thing to do for Canadian industry to ensure that not all their eggs are in one basket. Frequently, all the eggs of Canadian sectors are in the U.S. basket. And so to the extent that we have unforeseen or unexpected policy changes, for example, a 25% tariff on our goods going into the U.S., it's very helpful to have alternative partners. We've seen over the last 24 months, and certainly during President Trump's first presidency, Canada was really looking to expand partnerships around the world, in particular where we have free trade agreements, as in Europe, for example, under the CETA. Those give Canadian investors and Canadian exporters and importers real advantages on on the basis that the taxation risk and the taxation effect on goods being imported and exported is dramatically reduced to, generally speaking, duty-free. But while I can understand almost the knee-jerk reaction to say, if President-elect Trump is not interested in having Canadian goods, constituent goods, and service providers supporting the economy, we'll just cut them off. Realistically, that would be, first of all, effectively impossible for Canada to do. But more importantly, it just wouldn't be a meaningful, wise step from a policy perspective. We need that trading relationship, but it's very important to emphasize that the U.S. needs our trading relationship just as much.
Yeah, no kidding. There's a lot of this, obviously, there's the NATO angle and defense spending, which I think is a big part of it. Speculatively, I feel that way. I also think, of course, though, that the threats of tariffs have resonated, and you can tell it's resonated across Canada. You can make a very solid argument that response to the tariffs threat is a big part of what sent ripples through the Liberal cabinet, what ultimately may have been part of what contributed to Justin Trudeau's resignation when it happened. These 25% tariffs, we talked to Alberta's premier a couple of weeks ago, talked about the impact that it would have on Alberta's economy, and I think most people recognize it would impact Canadians and Americans alike. Can you help us understand that a little bit more, what we know about the history of tariffs between these two nations and ultimately who pays?
That's right. No, and those are all great questions. So tariffs are effectively a tax on imported goods. One of the main, in fact, arguably the biggest purpose of a free trade agreement is to eliminate tariffs so that there is, as the name suggests, free trade between nations. So looking at that at a very high level, what that means is I can ship something to the US that I make in Canada, and my US partner can import it into the US without paying customs duties, which are effectively a tax. That makes supply chain management not only more efficient, but also much more affordable, which meaningfully impacts the bottom line of corporations, importers, and businesses all over North America. So all over the CUSMA area, Canada, US, and Mexico. And small, medium, and large size enterprises have built their supply chain and their economic strategies around that concept of free trade. And that includes businesses all around the United States, which will be dramatically impacted by this change in tariff policy. So what would this mean if a 25% tariff were added to all of Canadian product imports into the US is that the US importer, so not a government, not the Canadian government, but the US importer, usually a business, can be a small business as well, they are going to pay an additional 25% tax on that good based on the value of that good. And most of the time, profit margins will not accommodate an additional unexpected 25% cost on that good. So what that means to all businesses in the US that will rely on and that do rely on goods coming in from Canada is that there will be, in many instances, an impossibility to remain profitable on those transactions because the importer is going to have to absorb a 25% tax that wasn't accommodated and wasn't contemplated in their costing, in their purchase price, for example. And so if we look at the integration economically and from a North American supply chain commercial perspective, a 25% additional cost has the effect of effectively canceling out any benefit a particular sale might have into the US. And the question remains, who is going to bear that cost ultimately? So the first individual or entity that will bear that cost is the US importer. And what will they do with that cost? Because they will not be able to absorb 25% on all goods coming in. It's likely that they're going to try and push some of that cost or all of that cost down to their retail sector or down to the distributor or to the ultimate consumer. So at the end of the day, what generally happens with tariffs, in particular, if tariffs are going to be applied on every single good coming into the US from Canada, folks are going to go to Target, to Walmart, to lots of, small, medium, and large retail stores. And they're going to find likely that there will be cost inflation on everyday goods that the consumer seeks to buy. Because ultimately, while many of these importers and larger corporations in particular can likely find strategies to absorb the tariffs somehow, at the end of the day, it's still a profit-making business, and those costs have to be pushed to somewhere. And really interesting studies have been done based on President Trump's first presidency, because at that time, he also put tariffs on Canadian goods, in particular, for example, steel and aluminum goods. And we issued countermeasures. The federal government, Prime Minister Trudeau, and the Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, we issued countermeasures and counter tariffs where we said, fine, if you're going to put tariffs on Canadian goods, we're going to put tariffs on certain strategic U.S. goods, meaning that when an exporter in the U.S. sends those goods to Canada, unfortunately, the Canadian importer bears that cost. But what the effect of that tariff is meant to do is to prevent the importer from purchasing from the U.S. and purchase domestically. And what that does is that cuts off certain U.S. exporters from the Canadian economy. And what's interesting about these multiple studies that have been done, sort of as a post-mortem to Trump's tariff policies, almost in every single sector that was impacted by the tariffs, there was a net loss on the U.S. side, whether it's job loss, whether it's an increase in production costs, or whether it was an increase in costs of the goods being sold in the U.S. So in almost every single sector, on an equal, sort of neutral economic basis, it's widely accepted that the tariffs did not have the effect that President-elect Trump purports that they have, which is to really encourage Americans in this case to source domestically and buy domestically. There was one sector that had where there was a positive impact. And interestingly, that was on the washing machine sector, because Whirlpool in his first presidency was threatening to leave production out of the United States and go to and go elsewhere. I believe it was Mexico. And as a result, President Trump said, well, we're going to put tariffs on these goods and force the U.S. consumer to purchase domestically. And that actually did work. So there was an increase in employment and in production of that one particular product. But at the end of the day, it created about 1,800 jobs in the manufacturing sector of washing machines. But each of those jobs cost just shy of $1 million from an all-in cost increase on the U.S. consumer. So one wonders whether it's worth it, because at the end of the day, on an economic basis, tariffs generally, as we see, have caused more detrimental effects than positive effects.
On both sides. I appreciate you laying that out for us. I think it's, you sort of hope that the message and that the compelling points that you're making are landing where they need to land, that are resonating with the one guy, or at least his advisors, that they need to resonate with. Martha, before we thank you for your time, I just want to ask you, I feel like, we're watching different premiers, and I understand part of the job as a leader of a provincial government is to advocate for your province's economy, is to advocate for your province's people and residents, and et cetera, et cetera. So I understand what Doug Ford is doing. Maybe veering out of his lane, criticizing Mexico's participation in the USMCA and the like. I understand what Danielle Smith is doing. Obviously, she's told us that she plans on attending the inauguration. She's catching maybe some heat for that, but she's been certainly finding amplification by way of Fox News and other cable networks, and doing a lot of interviews down in the United States. But at the end of the day, premiers have absolutely no sway. Can you support me on this in striking trade deals or talking about border security? There's really a very limited amount that provincial governments can do in all of this, right?
It's an interesting piece to consider, especially in the context of many premiers, including Premier Ford, coming out in effectively a pretty bullish way to advocate what they are prepared to do or not prepared to do in respect of countermeasures that they could apply at the provincial level against these tariffs or other policies that they don't believe would be applicable or helpful to Canada. And so if we take Ontario, for example, Premier Ford has indicated, well, I'll just shut down the electricity and there will be millions of individuals living in Minnesota, in Michigan, and sort of border states, New York as well, that will be without power. And certainly that would be that would not be a welcome event for those individuals. And I guess the idea would be they would speak to their members in the House, in the Senate. They would try to get the message to back to President-elect Trump that this isn't working, and in fact, it's backfiring. But we do need to take into account what powers the premiers have at the provincial level. On not wanting to get into sort of a constitutional assessment, just at a very high level, our Constitution has what we call division of powers, and it allows the federal government to have certain powers to regulate. And importantly, in this discussion, one of those powers is trade and commerce, international trade and commerce. So when we're talking about counter tariffs, negotiating free trade deals, negotiating who can enter and who we would allow to exit free trade deals, that's really the federal government. Now, it's absolutely the case that the federal government takes into account the province's perspectives on each of these levels and on each of these issues. So it would be wrong to say the provinces don't have any impact on that federal policy. But at the end of the day, it's the federal government that has the constitutional authority to make these decisions and to effect them. What provincial premiers can do, however, is take different approaches to how they will manage goods and services that originate from their province. So, for example, if Premier Ford decided, I'm going to cause the stoppage of electricity or any other energy source coming from another province through another premier's decision-making, those decisions could potentially be challenged either constitutionally or through the CUSMA arrangement, the CUSMA agreement. But by the time those challenges would be heard and fed through the system, it's probably the case that there would have already been a diplomatic arrangement made between the countries and the folks impacted. And practically speaking, the issue would probably go away. It really becomes more of a political piece. But where premiers could look into potentially using their authority under the Constitution is things that, like, for example, adding perhaps taxation is an area where there is both provincial and federal authority. So perhaps provinces, for example, if we take electricity from Ontario, perhaps Premier Ford could investigate whether he and his team would consider having the constitutional authority to add an export tax to electricity to make it more expensive to be imported into the US. There are all sorts of things that premiers can do within their authority that don't include, for example, the renegotiation or the negotiation of a free trade agreement and countermeasures relating to tariffs. But there are political positions that they can take that may potentially be offside constitutional issues or offside rules and obligations that we are enshrined under the CUSMA. But practically speaking, it would really take a long time for those challenges to go through systems, courts, and tribunals. And by that time, the issue would probably be solved at a diplomatic level. So I do think it's helpful for the federal government to have premiers that are publicly taking what we generally call in the trade world a Team Canada approach. So we're sort of all in this together and we're going to work together. Different premiers will have different perspectives. The Alberta premier will have a different perspective, and that's what democracy is about. And that's what, our system of government is all about, where the federal government can have perspectives on what's important for free trade and provincial governments can disagree. But on the whole, when it comes to foreign policy, especially with our most important trade partner, it tends to be quite helpful for provincial and federal governments to work together on those policies.
Daniel's watching us live on YouTube right now. He says, what a great guest. Martha, we knew that you'd hit it out of the park. Is Vamp Fashions right in our live chat right now? Should this be a wake-up call to Canadian entrepreneurs and to Canadian businesses? Should we spend the next number of years exploring and building new trade partnerships and opportunities, globally speaking?
I have heard from a number of clients, again, small, medium, and large enterprises. So these issues are not just impacting global multinationals, small sort of mom and pop shops that export and import from the US as the main source of their business. Online vendors, for example, they are all very, very concerned about this 25% tariff and the fact that if it is enacted, in some instances, it's a bet the farm issue for them. And it could technically mean for some corporations, small businesses in Canada closing doors or going without profit for weeks or months, depending on how long this issue lasts. And now it remains to be seen whether cooler heads will prevail. And after inauguration, President Trump maybe narrows the scope of the tariffs, because having that widespread blanket tariff is going to negatively ultimately impact his constituents as well. But I think what we're learning from this, and many of my clients have indicated, this is their top priority for planning in 25 and 26, notwithstanding the fact that tariffs might take a shift and the blanket tariff might become much lower in scope or apply to certain sectors and not the others. It remains to be seen. What folks are learning is I need to ensure that my business is diversified to the extent that I'm not going to rely solely on Canada's largest trading partner. I'm going to find new relationships in Canada and source and sell domestically, because I know that the Canadian government is never going to pit me against my commercial partner in another province or something similar, although there still remains some trade irritants between provinces. But
Sure.
Really the message is, let's find a way to diversify supply chains. We will not get away from having a lot of our supply chains contingent and dependent on the US economy, but there's lots Canadian enterprises can do to look for other sources, especially strategically using and leveraging other free trade agreements.
Martha, we'll bring you back some other time if you're willing to talk about intraprovincial
Absolutely.
trade, because that is a whole different ball of wax.
It is indeed.
And obviously there's, I think a lot of trade is being held up. There's a lot of potential economic activity that's being stifled, but you've got clients to speak with. I know that you carved out some time for us today, and we sure appreciate it. Thanks for making time for Real Talk, Martha.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
Yeah, we sure will. That's Martha Harrison. She's an international trade lawyer with a ton of experience, obviously, and a partner at McCarthy Tétrault. You can learn more about what they do by visiting mccarthy.ca, and we'll link to that in the show notes. I saw that Sharon's watching us live on YouTube right now and says it's so wonderful to have somebody properly explain how tariffs work.
She was very, and Daily Stock right now on Instagram is saying very enlightening interview, great, well-spoken. She really we like the dumbed down stuff. She explained it. It's very complicated stuff that I don't think, as you're seeing, as news companies go out and interview people on the street and say, are you excited about Trump's tariffs? They don't seem to understand what it actually means, right? So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's important, I think, for Canadians and Americans, like you're saying, to better understand that. I want to get to more of your comments. There's a ton of them. Horse Lake Ranch is chiming in with implications as a rancher, talking about what's happening in their industry with beef prices, calf prices in particular, but also says people need to calm down. I do agree to a certain extent that you don't want to take the bait on this. But again, like I reiterated in my comments out of the gates, that this isn't a talk show host saying this. This isn't a comedian that's poking fun at Canada. This is the president-elect talking about arguably that nation's most important relationship, and certainly the most important trading relationship that Canada has, as Martha laid out for us. More on that in just a second. We're going to bring you more from Donald Trump. I want to get to your comments in the live chat that's powered by Park Power. Plus, on the lighter side of life, we're going to take you out to Jasper. I've got some stuff I want to show you that happened over the past week or so. We had just a wonderful time out there as a family. But first, I want to let you know that this conversation is happening with the support of North Road Investment Council. You can find them online at northroadic.com. Your wealth deserves specialized attention. And North Road Investment Council provides tailored strategies for high net worth individuals, ensuring that your financial goals are met with precision and care. Learn more about their one-of-a-kind digital risk advisory services at northroadic.com. They basically audit your setup and make sure that you're not going to get hacked. Make sure that your wealth, that your assets, that your family, and your business are protected against digital risks. North Road Investment Council is a steady hand and a studied voice to guide you through wealth and investing. Hey, if you don't have plans coming up in March, I want to invite you to join us at the comedy nights that are all part of what UCAN Youth Services does. You can find them online at ucan.ca. We told you late in 2024 how proud we are to be launching a partnership with this amazing nonprofit that creates opportunities for young adults, 18 to 25 type age that are stuck in a rut. Quite frankly, they're not participating in education or the economy. They're under or unemployed, but they've got a ton of potential. They just need a helping hand. Well, part of how UCAN accomplishes this is through their fundraising comedy nights. They're going to be going March 10th through 12th and March 17th through the 19th at Starlight Casino in the Comic Strip, featuring a star-studded lineup. You can learn more about getting involved in these 6 incredible nights of comedy by visiting ucancomedy.com. I'm going to be there one of the nights. Would love to have you join us. They're all in support of UCAN Youth Services. Again, that's ucancomedy.com. Our friends at California Closets, in addition to presenting the Real Talk live stream across 7 different platforms, well, they're also the best in the business when it comes to custom closets and storage solutions for your entire home. That includes your garage, your boot room, your laundry room, your primary bedroom, your living room. Our family has an entertainment center that we invested in about 9 years ago, and it pays off every single day. Make the most of your space with custom organizational systems from California Closets. It all starts with a free design consultation. You can request that free consultation today by visiting californiaclosets.ca. And I also wanted to sort of issue a note of congratulations. John, we're going to be celebrating this all year long, but 2025 is a big year for our friends at Friesen Brothers. 70 years ago, Frank Loveson opened that first butcher shop in Hinton, Alberta, and what has grown since then is nothing short of remarkable. Now 17 different locations across the province, still family owned and operated. How great is that? They've got a Ukrainian feast happening right now in support of that Christmas celebration. You can learn more about that and more, including that family essentials flyer I'm always talking to you about. Save money, put wonderful quality food on the table. All of it can be found online at friesen.com. I saw this from MA in our live chat as we were talking to Martha Harrison. I like what MA had to say. I noted that there seemed to be kind of a particular theme with some of the comments I was getting on my social media when I was tweeting about Donald Trump's comments yesterday. And if I can dumb it down and talk lazy and just say left-wingers and right-wingers, left-wingers didn't like the fact that we're even entertaining conversations about Canada and the U.S., Canada and the 51st state. And the right-wingers, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them seem to be pretty eager to trade in their passports and start flying the stars and stripes.
Yeah.
And MA says this is not a matter of right and left. This is a matter of right and wrong. And I thought that she really nailed it with that. I thought this was an intuitive comment as well from Elder Taz, who's watching us live on Facebook today. Elder Taz says, this is never going to happen, Canada joining the United States, because Indigenous people would never let it happen. That from Elder Taz. I also noticed that we had a lot of folks. We've got a great audience watching us live on LinkedIn today. And many of you are talking about how the constitutional implications would make this an insurmountable exercise. Rick's watching us live on LinkedIn. He says the U.S. is like 5% of global population. He says if you take out, the U.S., Russia, and a couple of their allies, that leaves like 8 billion people to trade with on planet Earth. Says the Americans cannot operate as an island, and attacking a friendly country will be met with disdain for even American citizens. Rick says, plus, remember that little thing we did in 1812? referencing burning down the White House. I had some fun with a tweet on that yesterday. Everyone was quick to point out it was the British, not the Canadians, that burned down the White House. But Rick goes on to say the funny part is that if, hypothetically, a Prime Minister Poilievre, work with me on this, were to put tariffs on Canadian oil and gas, Danielle Smith and her litigious Alberta cabinet would have a new villain. And sometimes you just need a villain. That from Rick on LinkedIn. Adrian's watching us on LinkedIn as well, says, I wouldn't be dismissive of Donald Trump's intent, but I would bet he doesn't know how this could actually happen. That from Adrian on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and thanks to Martha for just laying out how the previous tariffs, and I found what she was talking about, hurt Canada. Like $2.4 billion. Look at this. Look at when they started and to where they ended. Like that is not chump change. You know, we were talking the other day when you were said, you know, when somebody says 64 million or 70 billion, $2.4 billion from our GDP is that's substantial. Very substantial.
Yeah, I mean, it is and it isn't. It depends, I guess, on what industry you're in. But if your industry is affected by this, like Horse Lake Ranch, who's in there talking to us about what's happening with beef right now, says with the low Canadian dollar, with uncertainty around the border, calf prices are skyrocketing. That's an example. Lumber's an example. If you work in the auto manufacturing sector, which I think that, you know, here we are in Western Canada, most of that happens out east, and so it's not on our radar as much in so many ways as oil and gas might not so much be on the radar of people that are, you know, working in downtown Toronto on Bay Street or what have you. But when your industry is affected, I mean, I had friends yesterday musing about what this might mean for dairy, right? Canada and supply management. You remember, you know, when back in the day when Maxime Bernier was trying to catch Canadians' attention and just barely lost the leadership of the Conservative Party, let's not forget, before starting his People's Party of Canada. Maxime Bernier was promising to blow up supply management in Canada. I know a lot of people look at the American cheese markets, the American dairy markets, and they believe that it's time that Canada get rid of its system. Now, the big dairy lobby is powerful. You know, I said to my buddy yesterday, now, you know, I'm not
big cheese.
Big milk. Big milk. Why do you think Andrew Scheer drank out of the carton of milk? That is a thing. And that was not intended just to be purely comical.
100%.
That is a way that you might refer to it as virtue signaling in a way, or at least industry signaling to drink out of that milk. But the dairy lobby is powerful in Canada. But that might be something else that the Americans come for. That might be something else that Donald Trump would want to see on the table. Maybe he wants access for American dairy providers in Washington State, in Wisconsin, in other big states that produce a lot of dairy to have access or more access to Canadian markets. Canadian consumers might benefit from that. That's going to piss off dairy providers in Canada.
And I think that's now, as the days go by, that's the scary thing when you're hearing Trump talk. You're like, oh, he's doing what he does. He's getting the media in Canada to talk about him. You know, he's laying bombs on Trudeau. But when he specifically says, we don't need their cars, we don't need their milk. When he starts saying stuff like that, it starts to get like these are starting to be cheap shots. And again, I'll say props to our premier, Danielle Smith, for saying the joke has gone too far now. And props to Rob Ford, even though we know like Doug Ford, sorry, he's not going to turn the switch off on electricity. But at least people are standing up, because the last thing we want right now, and you were just talking about like on different sectors of the economy or whatever, but we're also like cost of living is crazy in both the States and Canada. The last thing we want is this turmoil, whether you're on the left and the right. You have to agree that this is just going to cause turmoil and divisiveness between our best friend down south. Yeah,
LJ says, watching us live on YouTube right now, says, isn't it interesting that it seems like everybody in the chat liked the guest? Says, good work, Martha. How often does that happen?
I think we did it the first time ever.
That might be a first.
People agreed on the guest.
That might be a first. Hey, let me put a bit of I told you I didn't know if we were going to talk about this today. I just want to bring this up because it's just my heart is heavy today. You know, we're talking about, you know, this relationship with the Americans. I just want to reiterate, like every Canadian or most Canadians have an affinity to the United States, have loved ones in the United States. We love the United States. It's actually a tough morning for our family, John.
Oh, the fires,
You know, the state of California, my cousin Jamie let us know, they live in Newport, said to us by way of a group text early this morning, arrived about 6 o'clock. She said it feels like the entire southern part of the state is on fire. It's my dad's older brother, Keith. He moved down there just after high school, raised his family family down there with his beautiful bride, Darlene. She's from Ontario. He's from Calgary. They moved down there. And so my cousins, Courtney, Jamie, and Philip have grown up just outside Los Angeles in Altadena. A huge gut punch, as we found out last night at about 10 o'clock Mountain Time, that they were being, my Uncle Keith, Auntie Darlene, evacuated from their home in Altadena. And I did share some private photos with you, John. You can go ahead and show those on YouTube. These were the final photos that were taken of their home on East Loma Alta Drive before they evacuated. And ultimately, John, they'll prove to be the final photos ever taken of that home, as the home was lost to fire overnight. My cousin Philip, his wife Neha, and their kids have now been evacuated from their home in Pasadena. And of course, all of them now gathering at my cousin Jamie, her husband Mike's place in Newport. So one house gone, potentially a second. Everybody's hearts are in their throats, and our thoughts are with the people in that wonderful, beautiful state of California. So it's interesting, like as I'm driving into work today, and you know, like beloved family members have just lost their home. This is the home where the pool that we swam in, you know, every third summer as we would go down and visit. This was the home where we had sleepovers, and it's, you know, it's a house, right? Everybody got out safe. Everybody's lives are preserved and protected, but also it's a real gut punch. You don't have to tell people in Jasper or people in Slave Lake or people in Fort McMurray what it's like to lose your house,
100%.
especially when it's a house that the family has been in for 50 years. And so I just like, it's kind of like an interesting thing happening in my brain and on my heart today as we talk about, you know, Donald, you know, the Americans can get bent if they think that they can fuck over Canada, and Canada demands to be respected. Yeah. And at the same time, we love American people. Yeah. And you know, we all have loved ones in the United States. And so I'm, you know, my heart's heavy today thinking of my loved ones, but it also reiterates to me the importance, and you were just touching on this, of this relationship and the meaningful nature of this relationship. And we love to beat the Americans in hockey, and we can't stand when they beat us. I mean, what about the World Juniors? The Americans beating Finland for the gold medal. And of course we hate to see it. And also deep down inside, I kind of love to see it too, because the American hockey program and international hockey has grown by leaps and bounds. It's been a friendly and fierce rivalry, but over the decades, this relationship between Canada and the United States has been characterized as a very, very positive and important one for both countries.
It is, and I feel for our neighbors down south. Thank you for mentioning, because I mentioned this today before we started the show. I feel like the wildfires in California right now are being pushed down in the media cycle just because of everything going on here in Canada, and with Trump going on air and saying crazy stuff. But it's another thing we share with you know, especially here on the West Coast, you know, BC, Alberta, with California, just fear of wildfires. And what we saw, of course, with Jasper and last summer and everything, it's super scary. And like peak season in Northern California, you know, it doesn't start till the spring. It peaks in like June or July. To have this happening in January, just cause for concern.
Yeah, it's not lost on me, buddy. I was thinking that exact same thing. You know, our family, it feels like the right time to do this. Why don't we take a break, and then we'll get to some of your more of your comments on what Donald Trump had to say. We'll bring you more of his commentary on Canada as the 51st state and his plans for this relationship. Our live chat is absolutely humming right now, powered by Park Power, and so we want to make sure you have that voice. But we as a family did have an opportunity to head out to Jasper, not to sightsee the devastation from the July wildfires, not that at all. But the fires were a reason why we had not been out there for months and months. Typically, as a family, we try to get out there 3-4 times a year because our hearts are out there. It's our second home. And as we present this kind of a personal edition of MyJasper Memories, proudly presented on Real Talk by Tourism Jasper, I do it as a note of celebration, John, and a shout out to a community that is exhibiting resilience, strength, and courage every single day. There's nothing quite like staying at the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge, if I'm being honest. You want to roll that video I showed you? This was New Year's Eve morning. For those of you listening on the podcast, you know, the balcony off that great hall looks out onto that heated pool. I can give you the exact number. I asked the Fairmont team member there. I said, "What do you keep the pool at?" She says, "It should be 93 degrees on the nose." How's that? A heated outdoor pool pool at 93, the hot tub at whatever it is, 104, and a light dusting of snow on New Year's Eve day. So you know where we were. We were in the pool and then headed in as a family for just an absolutely fantastic New Year's Eve feast. The team, the culinary team at the Fairmont, buddy, did I ever hit the buffet? You want to show my plate? Let me take you through this. That is bison ribeye roast.
Wow.
Okay, so that was a bison prime rib. Unbelievable. And of course they did this amazing ravioli, and they had the crab legs and everything else. Sometimes you just need to sit in front of a fire, a crackling fire, and not a fire that turns on with the flick of the switch. I'm talking about the concierge, I'm talking about bartenders and servers throwing actual wood onto an actual crackling fire.
I love it.
And keeping those Jasper brewing pints
now,
topped up as well.
Was this pint before or after you went out and hit the ice?
Yeah, well, let me tell you, this was another special occasion as well. Mildred Lake, or Lake Mildred, also on the property at the Fairmont, has been such a special venue for our family. And over New Year's, Noah Bear, our little guy's 2.5, his very first skate, John. And the reason why I get double chills is because about 7 years ago, his older brother Wyatt also had his first skate on Lake Mildred. So absolutely fantastic. They've got all their ODRs. They've got their outdoor rinks out there swept and maintained. So you can go out there and slap the biscuit around, as they say. Just a wonderful, memorable experience. I can tell you, Marmot Basin.
Was it good?
That dump of snow on New Year's Day or New Year's Eve Day was just absolutely perfect. And so we were riding those lifts. I had a chance to check out the new knob quad chair. You can ride all the way up to the top as well. But family time at Marmot Basin, it's absolutely fantastic. We checked out, they have some childcare options there as well. So Noah Bear was able to mix and mingle with his fellow toddlers while we hit the slopes. And I wanted to celebrate the people. This is Patty. And anybody that's been out at the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge once or even twice, let alone 10 or 15 times, will know Patty, because he's one of their long-time concierge. He's one of those guys, the friendly, smiling faces that'll meet you right when you pull up to the lodge.
Oh, I love it.
And it was wonderful. When I actually saw him, I exclaimed, "Patty!" And he kind of laughed and walked over, and I hugged him. I didn't plan on it, but I gave him a hug, and I said, "How have you been? How have you been through the summer? And what did your fall look like?" And we just feel such a connection to the people out there. It's the people that make such a difference. Yes, the majesty and the beauty of the Rocky Mountains and that wonderful golf course out there and everything else, obviously. But it's gathering and community and fellowship out there that makes the Fairmont something special, and the town of Jasper as well. Yeah, there were brunches in the room because the views are astounding no matter where you are. And we just had such an absolutely wonderful time. And I wanted to put this on your radar, Real Talkers, because right now is a wonderful time of year for you to get out there with your family as well. Of course, you know that Jasper in January is a really big deal. It's one of the best times of year. You know, the temperature drops and it gets a little bit chilly, and you've got all these opportunities to try things. I'm thinking of like horse-drawn sleigh rides out on Pyramid Lake. We've done that as a family. Getting out to Marmot, you can check out, do these beautiful ice walks and the guided tours. Jasper's restaurants are welcoming visitors back. And of course, we know that the tourism and the hospitality industry is so important to this crown jewel in the Canadian Rockies, to this town. And so we want to encourage you, if you're considering getting away, taking some time with the family, to consider Jasper in January. If you go to jasper.travel/January, you can check out some of the specific events and activities that they're featuring through the month. I'm feeling a little bit spoiled, John. I'm actually gonna be heading back out there on Friday. I didn't get enough. I didn't get enough of Marmot. I didn't get enough of Marmot Basin, so I'm going back
Coming
out
with
there.
you. I'm hiding in the trunk.
Yeah, you should come back out with me.
I got this weekend off.
We should do some shows out there.
First weekend off.
Why don't we
like
do some
9
shows out
months.
there? You know what we did actually at I think they're calling it the Bears Den. When we were at the Fairmont, they have their new virtual golf. You can play golf against the screens in there. So we were watching the World Junior game. Ultimately didn't end up the way that Canada wanted it to, but we're watching the World Junior game and we're playing golf and just getting excited about the golf season to come. You know, the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge in 2025, the course will be open. I'm not going to announce what date yet because I think that's still being figured out.
Keep it under your hat.
There's still some work to be done, but they're going to make sure that golf course is open this summer. And why is that in particular such a big deal? Because 2025 marks 100 years since that Stanley Thompson designed course first opened.
Oh, wow.
So it is its centennial out at the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge, that golf course, of course. But we got some time between now and then. So if you're considering a getaway, consider Jasper in January. MyJasper Memories is proudly presented weekly on Real Talk by our good friends at Tourism Jasper. I kind of like the idea of taking Real Talk on the road to Jasper. Maybe you and I should get serious about
definitely.
that. So Donald Trump basically catching the world's attention. I wanted to, we had our Real Talk studio band playing that nice acoustic guitar, and then now it's time to get back. It's time to get back into it. Why don't we tee up that other Donald Trump clip? This is more of what he had to say, obviously holding court at Mar-a-Lago, and you had a ton of journalists there that are asking him about a number of things, including this trade relationship with Canada and his assertion that he thinks that Canada should join the U.S. Whether or not he's serious, this is more on what Trump had to say.
Mr. President, if we were to work under the assumption that you're serious about making Canada 51st state of the United States, the leader of the Conservative Party in Canada said, under no circumstance will it ever be the 51st state.
Maybe he won't win, but maybe he will. I don't
point, you had suggested.
Listen, I don't care what he says.
But Sir Lopez, you said you were considering military force to acquire Panama and Greenland. Are you also considering military force to annex and acquire Canada?
No, economic force. Because Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like, and it would also be much better for national security. Don't forget, we basically protect Canada. But here's the problem with Canada. So many friends up there. I love the Canadian people. They're great. But we're spending hundreds of billions a year to protect it.
Tons of friends up there. I'd like to take control of all of them and invite them to a barbecue and then take their water, their oil, their beautiful mountains and put them in a blender and just drink it like a smoothie.
Well, yeah. And Donald Trump is right when you take a look at that artificially drawn line, otherwise known as the international border. Yeah. And keep in mind, the border, this guy, I know that some of what I'm saying is super obvious already, but this artificially drawn line is the number one sticking point for him when he was talking about if you want to avoid these 25% tariffs, you got to do something. And what you got to do is stop the flow, he said, of fentanyl and handguns, or fentanyl and firearms from Canada into the U.S. So much for this artificially drawn line. He actually cares a great deal about that border. And the border is a big deal. But what's the biggest deal, in my mind, about the Canada-U.S. border is it is the largest unpatrolled, generally speaking, aside from border stations, and obviously people can call me on the technicalities here, but you get the point. It's the largest friendly border on planet Earth.
Sure, but, the states, and we've seen this, and I don't want to get, into the argument on why wars happen, but the states likes to acquire things. They like to go to other places and make sure they're set up for the future. And I've seen a bunch of pundits yesterday, and two or three of them mentioned near the end of their interviews about our water, about our resources here that are untapped, about the massive amount of land up north that is not being used, and other things that Donald Trump could come over here and put his fingers into that pie. So that's something I'm really scared of as well. And talking about imaginary lines, so we're just going to erase all borders. And then my last thing I'll say is, fentanyl from Canada into the States, big problem. Let's erase the border and fix it and clean it. No mention of Mexico, whose drugs that flow into the United States is about 100x of what comes from Canada down into the States. So all kind of ridiculous to me.
Well, I think that he sees more opportunity in Canada
of
right
course.
now.
And I think that's what I'm trying to draw the line from.
You also sort of believe...
It's not about drugs.
You also sort of feel that he'll be distracted by the next shiny thing, and maybe if we just STFU about all of this,
like a cat,
it'll just go away. But I had a bee in my bonnet yesterday, and I'll acknowledge we're having some fun with this. Obviously, even today's show, we hope that you're smirking a little bit and having some fun listening to it and participating in it. But I tweeted yesterday, any Canadian even remotely entertaining this merger BS should surrender their passport. As soon as you say something like that, you're going to get people all fired up. I said this is an important time-tested trade trade relationship integral to two sovereign nations. And I said, and I believe, and it's obvious, in 2025, we'll find out what Pierre Poilievre is really made of.
Oh, yeah.
Marco J replied to me and said, you Canucks should pray we don't want your lame frozen wasteland. If we ever do, we could take it easily. That from Marco J, a follower from stateside.
Wow.
Others of you were invoking the name of Danielle Smith. I retweeted Justin Trudeau, retweeted Pierre Poilievre, by the way, as well. But Trudeau, with his assertion there isn't a snowball's chance in hell that Canada would be part of the United States, I said, fucking A. And every party leader in the country should be just as clear Canada won't be disrespected. Now, there's a ton of comments here, and I'll get into some of them. But Dead Rat Man said, well, I bet that your buddy, Danny, will disagree with you. He's referencing the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith. Now, here's the thing, Dead Rat Man and others. We did, in fact, ask Alberta's Premier about this when she sat down with us exclusively for a year-end interview on December 19th. It was an episode you should check out if you missed it. It's a couple of weeks ago, but it's not aged. It holds up. Sit-downs, lengthy interviews, long-form conversations with Edmonton's Mayor Amarjeet Sohi and the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith. And we did talk to her about this. We asked her how she feels about Donald Trump trolling Canada. Governor Trudeau and Canada is the 51st state. I know that some people find it amusing. Some people go, it's Trump being Trump. But there's a lot of people that are pretty ticked off about it. I know that you snickered at it in past. I mean, how do you actually feel about it?
What's the phrase in comedy? Once funny, twice dead. It's not getting funny anymore. And I think I've talked with Dominic LeBlanc, who was at that Mar-a-Lago dinner. And I said, what's going on here? And he said, I don't know. It was a joke at the table. And so why is it continuing on? What you can see from the president-elect is that he takes a position of dominance in order to get a win in negotiations. Canada buys more goods from the Americans than their biggest trading partners, than Germany and Italy and France and the UK combined. And that's something that we need to make sure that the president understands. You put these kinds of tariffs on, it's going to result in a trade war. It's just going to hurt Canadian and American consumers, Canadian and American producers. And then the very country he's most concerned about, China, is the one that's going to win from that.
That was Premier Danielle Smith on the December 19th episode. That was 3 episodes ago of Real Talk.
And perfect point there, that, we're talking about all this today on the show. We know it's not going to be a reality. And Martha alluded to this in our interview at the start. I love it because she pinpointed it exactly. We know this isn't really going to happen, the annex, the merger, whatever you're talking about. But it's a way to strong arm. It's what Trump does best. It's a chess move to put him in the lead in whatever race him and our next prime minister are going to have when they go out the gates, when our next prime minister is elected.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this from Leslie in our live chat powered by Park Power. Your friendly local utilities provider says the North is being used. The boreal forest essential to the planet's biodiversity and climate. Can we not mess that up too? Please, more of your comments on Twitter, on X, for those of you that follow me there. Prairie Baron said all of this may be good talk, referencing the Prime Minister's tweet, Justin Trudeau's tweet about a snowball's chance in hell, said we failed to insulate ourselves against this from happening and have over-relied on the United States as an ally. Prairie Baron says we need to get our house in order quickly and we need to get our priorities straight. My cousin Dave in Westlock, Alberta, Dave Jesperson, shout out, says Pierre Poilievre did give a similar statement to Justin Trudeau. The problem I have, says Dave, is we're in a democracy. And if enough people want to go, come on, Dave. Dallas says a lot of patriots are coming out now. Oh, how very, very patriotic. Elsie says if nobody's noticed, what's happened to Ukraine is happening to Canada. Who's behind the 8 ball here? I don't know if I'd invoke that example quite yet, but we'll take the point. Jason says the fact that this is even a discussion is hilarious. Eddie says maybe an emergency coalition government is in order. Just like the last time the entire annexation of Canada by the States was the talk of the town, Canadians opted to put differences aside, work together, and the result was confederation. Joel, from the account Not Woke US, says you're about to witness one of the greatest transitions of power you've ever seen. Check this out. Show my screen, Johnny. Joel shows that he's got the entire map of North America minus Mexico. It was emblazoned with the stars and stripes and the photo of Pierre Poilievre. That other JJ wants to see an election called right now. Lumberjack Commando says, it's such a shame about the gun ban. There were a lot of comments about guns and bombs and the insufficient Canadian military. I don't want to start going down that road. I don't think we're going to storm the Capitol. I don't think that Canada wants to be at war with the United States metaphorically, verbally, or otherwise. I think we want to play nice. We've always played nice. And obviously, the United States is a military superpower. This type of conversation is absolutely moronic. But make no mistake, our American friends and neighbors, there are a lot of guns up here, right? We just don't jack off to them, right? Is that fair to say? What about this? Tim says, I didn't take having to join the military on my 2025 bingo card. Mike says Justin Trudeau has no say in the matter. Neil says, why don't we just go throw tampons at Trump? Okay, Neil, we get it. Johnny Utah says, we've disrespected ourselves for a decade. I said, nobody disrespects Canada. Lisa says, here's Donald Trump dissing our military and our veterans. If you stand for what he's saying, F you. That from Lisa DH. Charlene says Danielle Smith's a traitor by attending the inauguration. Randy says, what are we going to do? Collapse our economy to show them how serious we are? Says, we've not been a strategic partner to the States for 80 years. Hard disagree, Randy. Says, we can't do much. For the first time in most of our lives, we're realizing how helpless we are. World News Center says Justin Trudeau made a career out of disrespecting Canada. Danny Diamond says it doesn't help when your neighbors to the south elect a shitbag criminal with an IQ just north of a rocking horse. He's just, okay, and then he makes a Jewish comment. I'm going to move on past that. Didn't see that one coming. Why can't we make comments online without invoking some of that stuff? I digress. Mr. Hammy says this ass clown Trudeau resigned less than 24 hours ago and people believe he has a spine now. Daisy says this wouldn't even be on the table if it wasn't for Trudeau's disastrous leadership. He put us in this position. Lork says we do have no leg to stand on here. Trump does have a point. They do pay for a lot of our stuff, and we give them a lot of our resources. If we weren't such a cocked nation, maybe we could actually be a superpower in the world, but we won't because our politicians are eating us. Lork, I'm so glad you invoked the word cock, because who are the real cocks here, really? If you look at who's keen on the idea, if you look at the Canadians that actually think it's hilarious what Donald Trump's saying and doing, that are ready, that are eager, that are lining up to hand in their passports, just read the comments on my tweet. There's a whole bunch of them, even though Twitter's not really real life. Have you ever heard that expression? Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Believe it or not, there are a chunk of Canadians who are all hot and bothered about Trump's ridiculous ego-stroking fantasy of turning Canada into the 51st state. And I think if you're not laughing about this, you're probably crying about it. Like, first of all, how do you reconcile this with any shred of national pride, right? You cheer for Canada. We talked about the World Juniors. You wave the maple leaf. You Instagram your Tim Hortons double-double, right? And then you turn around and say, well, maybe we should let Donald Trump annex us. Like, what? These are the same people that are chirping about sovereignty and independence every time somebody brings up the United Nations or the World Economic Forum or the Paris Climate Accord. But suddenly now everybody's ready to throw it all away because some failed steak salesman with a spray tan thinks that he can add Canada to his collection of golf courses. Come on. Give me a break, right? There's hypocrisy here at play. These are people that would lose their mind anytime that Quebec talks about going it alone, but then some twice impeached, indicted American president dangles the idea of making us the 51st state, and you're like, please tell us more? It's pathetic, right? You're not patriots. You're groupies. Would you feel the same way if Kamala won the election? Would you feel the same way 4 years from now when Donald can't run again? This is beta energy, to put it into words that you can understand. You're groveling at the feet of a guy that's built his entire brand on pretending to be an alpha. More of that language that will resonate with you, right? He's over here eating KFC with a fork and a knife and bragging about winning elections that he lost, but we're going to bow our knee to that guy? Like, yeah, Donald Trump, take our healthcare system and mess it up like you did your casinos, and what do we get for the bonus? School shootings? Like, have you seen the state of American politics? All the Canadians that think that this is a great idea, the gridlock, the culture wars that have paralyzed that nation to a certain degree. Infrastructure's crumbling while they're arguing about drag queens and gas stoves. Come on, right? Imagine trading in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms for the Second Amendment. I know some of you would make that trade right now, but imagine having to fight over whether or not your kid could read a book about penguins because it was too woke. Right? That's what we're talking about right now. Imagine trading your universal health care for GoFundMes for cancer treatment. That's what you're signing up for. But maybe it's not about politics for some people. Maybe it's about vibes. Like they like Donald Trump's. He calls it how he sees it. He tells it how it is, right?
Guy's a straight shooter.
Telling it like it is doesn't mean lying about election results or claiming that you can declassify documents just by thinking about it. You're drawn to the grift. You guys aren't patriots. You're sycophants. And worst of all, it's boring. There's no imagination. You want to talk about no backbone? Yeah, yes, Mr. Trump, sir. Make Canada great again. Give me a break. No, Canada's not perfect, obviously. And we got a lot to fix. And the next prime minister has their work cut out for them. Housing and healthcare and reconciliation and climate change and a million other things. But you don't fix it by turning your back on everything that Canada has stood for. You don't fix it by running into the arms of a con artist that wouldn't know the difference between Moose Jaw and Mississauga if you gave him a map and a compass. I tried to think of two M's.
Moose
I really
Jaw.
wanted to.
Is that a delicacy in,
Yeah.
in
Where's
Canada?
this Mississauga? So here's my message to the Canadians that are waving the MAGA hats and that are dreaming of being annexed. Like, start with some self-respect. Yeah? Right? Start acting like you give a damn about this country that's given you so much. And if you can't muster that, well then, again, don't let the door hit you on the way out. 100,000 Canadians head down to the States every year. Maybe you could be one of them. Plenty of Americans would love to trade places. Talk to any of them that are trying to access the healthcare system without $500,000 in their bank account right now. They actually admire Canada. Imagine that. Imagine it.
Agree.
Peaches says, "Don't touch my healthcare. The sky is falling." Says, "Canadians need to get harder," says Peaches. "We're so soft right now.
Oh, yeah, we're so soft.
We're so soft." You know what sounds soft? Is all of a sudden bending the knee to a guy that suggests that all of a sudden that Canadian flag doesn't represent something.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there's nothing to be proud of with this nation. And that is driving me absolutely nuts.
The same, and it's deep inside me, and I think I have kind of a unique perspective because I do love America. I was born there. I have family there. It's it's ingrained in me. But I've been in Canada so long, and I would never move back to the States. This is an amazing country. It's safe. We're soft, brackets nice to each other. And I mean, you were just bringing up the guns. I mean, yeah, we've got guns, but I mean, I looked at a study. We haven't done one for about 10 years, but about 90% of them are hunting rifles. We've only got and 12% of all the guns in Canada are people owning handguns. That's legally. It's hard to track guns and stuff like that. But down in the States, I mean, 80% of them are handguns. I mean, so if soft is being nice and not shooting up schools and trying to get along with our neighbors, even though their leader says he wants to come up here and take us over, hey, I'll take soft any day over what's going on down there.
Ken K is absolutely right when he says, "I'll tell you what's soft. Soft is fanboying a bully." And Ken throws a bullseye right there.
Yeah.
They want to see soft. I'm looking forward to this Four Nations face-off. Let's see how they think is soft when the Canadians take on these other three and
I was gonna
walk
say-
away with the championship.
I was gonna
We're
say-
coming for the Stanley Cup in June, too, by the way.
Yeah. You were making some serious points there, so I didn't want to jump in. But as you were saying all the things we need to fix in Canada, I think Hockey Canada is one we should put on the list.
Oh, my gosh.
Also, let me say before we go here, this Elon Musk comment, I'll go back to it today. Girl, you're not the governor of Canada anymore, so it doesn't matter what you say in regards to our prime minister. I hate when guys do this nowadays. And maybe you're going to call me soft again, but referring to someone as a female, and trying to make them feel less than simply because they're feminine or relating that to being a woman is weak. That's another thing that just fucking pisses me off, man. It's like the lowest, it's like, I know you are, but what am I? It's like the lowest insult. It's like the bottom of the barrel from a guy who a lot of people say is a genius. And this is the best comment.
He's the richest man in the world, and he's arguably the most influential voice that Donald Trump's going to be listening to in the next 4 years. Elon Musk basically bought himself the White House. Is that safe to say? Totally. How about this? I'm hearing from USA Divides by 32, an account on X who follows me, says everything you export, it's an American talking to me, says everything you export here, we can do ourselves or get elsewhere, except hockey night in Canada, but your woke bullshit screwed that up too. That from USA divides by 32. Let us know what you think about this. Talk at RyanJesperson.com is where you can send us an email. The live chat's been absolutely amazing today, powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider. And of course, you can find us on all the social media platforms at Real Talk RJ and at Ryan Jesperson. This conversation does not happen without Real Talk partners like Athabasca University. This is Canada's open university. I'm pretty sure that they would accept American students as well. Want to talk about opening up the borders? I better not go too far on this. I am not the registrar. I am not the registrar. But Athabasca University is Canada's open university with world-class accredited online degrees and courses designed so you can complete your education wherever, whenever it works for you. You can check out their programs and courses online at athabascau.ca. If this has you thinking about maybe a career in international relations, political science, commerce, trade, the legal profession, you can go ahead and check out everything that they offer. Hundreds and hundreds of opportunities, all custom based on your schedule, your availability. That's what sets AU apart. You can learn more today at athabascau.ca. Our friends at Complete Care Restoration are in the business of getting people back on their feet following the devastation of natural disasters like wildfire and floods. Sometimes it's, oh man, my buddy's dad, his name is Sean. I was talking to him yesterday, Johnny. They had a filter crack above their fridge the other day. The entire main floor of their house, this beautiful bungalow, flooded. The entire floor. Absolute nightmare. If you have walked miles in these shoes, you know the toll it can take on you, including your emotions. The best part about Complete Care Restoration, they've got, number one, a quarter century of experience restoring properties, rebuilding peace of mind, but also they work directly with your insurance company, so you don't have to. You can take that off your plate. We have worked with them personally. We recommend them wholeheartedly. You can find out more at CompleteCareRestoration.ca. And we want to help you out if it's a year of new beginnings and new opportunities for you. If you're underemployed or you're just quite frankly not happy with where you're working, you have more to contribute, you have more to give. Kubi Renewable Energy is literally always hiring. Out of their locations in Kamloops, Lethbridge, Calgary, and Edmonton, Kubi provides solar energy solutions to power your life as a full-service contractor for both residential and commercial solar power systems. You can follow the careers link at kubienergy.ca to learn more about opportunities in your neck of the woods, or if you're willing to relocate, this could be a whole new opportunity for you. Plus, you can get a free quote. If you're thinking of putting panels on your roof this spring, get your free quote today at kubienergy.ca.
Love the Cubes.
Great to see them as well at their Christmas party just before we broke.
Yeah, we're going to see them in 3 weeks at the pond hockey.
You know, yeah, they're going to be out at the Real Talk Pond Hockey Classic. Still have 5 spots available for teams to register at the Real Talk Pond Hockey Classic.
RyanJesperson.com.
Yeah, if you go to our website, RyanJesperson.com, you click on the events link, John. It's nice and easy to find. That's the Real Talk Pond Hockey Classic in partnership with the Canadian Progress Club in St. Albert, all in support of 3 wonderful charities and just an amazing day. It's Saturday, February 1st in St. Albert. We always say beers, bonfires, burgers, and of course the sound of the ODR. There's no better winter sound in Canada. That's the Real Talk Pond Hockey Classic coming up on the 1st. Obviously, we've got a lot to talk about, and as this week moves on, we'll continue to bring you these expert voices that actually provide informed insights into the stories that are making news across the country and around the world. A lot of times, the guests that you hear or see here on Real Talk have been suggested by real talkers who think that they may bring value to the table, and many, many times they have proven to be correct. So be in touch with us anytime. We sincerely want to know what you think about what you're hearing here on the show. Thanks for sharing it with your friends. Thanks for subscribing on YouTube, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Kandola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta, on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjasperson.com.